It was now 1943, and we had experienced the war for almost 4 years. Air raids, bombings, and sleepless nights, sitting in Steinfeld's long corridor on the ground level of Oma Schreiner's 4-story apartment building. We sat on a long row of chairs. The way to the bunker was too far. Until the beginning of 1941, Fadi was with us and prepared for entertainment. One of our favorite games was Bimbo, a game consisting of cards with upper and lower case letters to form words. The person with the most words wins. Klaus and I had a shoebox filled with a collection of shrapnels. Klaus' collection was always bigger and better because he dared to search for them on the roof of Oma Schreiner's house, to her horror and fear. Fadi had been drafted in the beginning of 1941, and Mutti was alone with her children. Renate had been born after an air raid during the night of the 2nd to 3rd day of May. Mutti knew it was time for her arrival and hoped the air raid would stop long enough to get to the hospital on time. It was, and my Mutti walked from our house to Finkenau to deliver our younger sister. I had spent a beautiful school year with my school class and 2 teachers in Ettal, close to Oberammergau in Bavaria. Klaus was now in Kupitzen with his school class and teachers. This was a government effort to give school children a rest from the constant air raids. And now it was the summer of 1943. Tante Lona invited us to spend some vacation days away from the ever-threatening bombing attacks. Her family had already lost their home in Lübeck and had been evacuated to Travemünde, a beautiful resort at the Baltic Sea. Mutti accepted the invitation, packed some suitcases with play clothes and swim suits, and we took the train away from Hamburg to Lübeck. And then it happened. In 3 days, Hamburg was destroyed. The morning after, the sky was completely gray and the sun a tiny orange balloon in the sky. We were at the beach, Mutti wading in the water, sighing, "Man immer guten." I don't know what I read here. Mutti was wading in the water and sighing and saying, "Futsch is futsch and hin is hin." What is gone is gone. In the meantime, Fadi had a furlough and made his way from the Russian front to the outskirts of Hamburg. With public transportation virtually non-existent, he walked through the destroyed city to our home. The house was no more, and he came to Travemünde hoping to find us there. What a blessing and miracle that we were not in Hamburg during those fateful days, and Fatih saw us alive and well. Travemünde became now the meeting place for Mutti, Fatih, Christa, Renate, Tante Hilda, Onkel Arthur, Lona, Gerda, and Oma Schreiner. The government evacuated all who had lost their home, and we were assigned to the small town of Cham in the Oberpfalz near Regensburg. And so we traveled with 10 people and an assortment of 11 pieces of luggage. One was a Keilkissen, the wedge-shaped mattress piece at the head of a bed. As best as we could with interruptions, because of distraction, it helped immensely that Fatih was with us. A soldier in uniform had much more clout than ordinary people. Our family's new home was on the top floor of the local high school. The principal and one teacher, Herr Sauer, had their apartment there, and we had one room with a separate entrance under the roof. The welcome by Frau Raum, the principal's wife, was so kind and inviting. We have been waiting for you. That we really did feel that was a good beginning for the challenging next 2 years. We had no bathroom or toilet, always had to use our landlord's. On the other hand, I had the shortest way possible to school, just down a flight of stairs. Herr Sauer had an unforgettable way to start his class. Heil Hitler, lasst uns beten, in one sentence, without interruption. Heil Hitler, let us pray. Lona and I played in our spare time with our dolls. We each had about 10, none taller than 4 inches. We sewed, knitted, and crocheted their clothing and made furniture out of matchboxes, empty spools of thread, and cardboard. We played on a flat part of the roof right out of the window, and sometimes outside among trees and meadows. The school was on the edge of town. We built a fence for our doll's home out of twigs. The next spring, it was a living fence. Every twig had sprouted. Klaus in Kubitzen was miraculously close to Cham. He was able to visit. Fatih sent skis to me that I used on the hills surrounding the city. He was also able to get a violin for me, and I had lessons from a nun. 40-cent money, many small packages from the Russian front. Since he did not drink or smoke, he was able to trade these valuable items for food the soldiers received in their ration. I fondly remember knäckebrot, rice crisp, and vitamin C tablets that tasted like candy. We were, of course, totally separated from the church, but somehow Mutti was in possession of a Book of Mormon, which she read to us every day. Mutti had asthma. When she suffered from an acute attack, oh, how was it hard for us children to see her labor for each breath. We would walk to the doctor to ask him to come and help, but sometimes we had to wait anxiously for what seemed an eternity before he arrived. Another somewhat distressing experience was my bout with yellow fever, jaundice. My stomach would not accept any food, and I became very weak. My first appetite after many days was for fruit, and oh, how absolutely delicious it tasted. Food was rationed, but occasionally there was enough to bake. We did not have an oven though. Mutti would prepare the cake, and then we would have to walk to town to the bakery, who would allow us to use their oven, and we would make a second trip to pick it up when it was finished. Eggs were very hard to get. Mutti was sometimes able to barter in surrounding farming communities. She had this ingenious way to preserve them in a special brine. Those years in Kham were peaceful and sheltered from the war, from air raids, bombing, and destruction, until the war ended in 1945. American soldiers now occupied our city and used our school for their living quarters in quite a destructive way. They threw all the musical instruments out of an upper story window, and they landed in a sad, broken heap on the ground. Just before the very last days of the war, Mutti had the good sense to pick up Klaus from Kupitzen and bring him home. Since we had to vacate the school, our new home was now in the local monastery, where Oma Schreiner had lived in one room, which she shared with us. The monastery was surrounded by a big garden with many apple trees. With food now more scarce than ever, I think those apples saved us. This was the time when we always had to stand in long lines to get anything. I have a vivid memory of standing in line for horse meat. Of course, there was no school, so Moody found a nun who gave English lessons. There is a great deal doing in army blankets, is all I remember. Our greatest desire was now to somehow return to Hamburg. But how? Trains did not exist anymore. In Moody's effort to find a way home, she located someone with a truck who was prepared to transport a load of passengers with their luggage to North Germany. We sat on wooden benches on the open truck bed, and all our belongings were in 2 suitcases. For the night, we found a place to sleep somewhere on straw. The truck drivers promised to watch our luggage, but in the morning, one of our suitcases was gone. Uncle Arthur had had an important job at Blom and Voss, a large shipyard, which had enabled him to bring his family to Hamburg a year earlier into his own little house in Poppenbüttel. Thanks to his kindness, that became our temporary home until we would be able to find something a little bit more permanent. Oma Schreiner owned an industrial building behind her destroyed apartment building. That was left intact. One room on the first floor became this permanent place for us to live. We have a lot of practice combining bedroom, living room, and kitchen in a small space. Some of my memories living again on Wagnerstraße are Klaus' constant effort to find things that might be useful. At the bombed-out Hochbahn, overhead railway, he located light bulbs that were still working and brought them home. The British armed forces had left their tanks abandoned. Somehow Klaus found out where they were and searched them for hidden treasures. He found cans with bread pudding. Oh, was that delicious! We had a little stove to cook and heat our room apartment, but we needed wood, which was hard to come by. Klaus cut down one of the linden trees that lined our street, but it was green wood and produced a lot of smoke and very little heat. He joined the many other Hamburg hungry people who would take the train to the farm areas around the city and try to trade anything useful for food. This was the time we were introduced to cornbread and watery vegetable soup. Thanks to Allied relief effort, Okay, let me start again. This was the time we were introduced to cornbread and watery vegetable soup. But slowly, slowly, life began to become a little bit more normal. The church became part of our life again. The Barmbek branch was organized and met right on Wagnerstraße in one of the rooms of what used to be known to us as Kochschule. No heat. Part of the windows boarded up with pieces of wood. In fact, it was sometimes so cold that the water in the sacrament cups was frozen, and we tried with our gloved fingers around it to thaw it out. The biggest change was leaving Wagnerstraße and moving to Rahlstedt. We were assigned the upstairs in a one-family, good-size home. We had a living room with a kitchen corner, a bedroom, and another very small room that held one bed. For us, it was such a great and beautiful improvement. But for Herr and Frau Schlüchen, having to give up part of their home, having 5 people living, moving, and making noise right above their heads, I think Mutti felt keenly unwelcomed. And yet, it must have felt a small challenge compared to the very heavy burden of not knowing anything about Vati. Was he even alive? Finally, after months of anxiousness and fears, the Red Cross made it possible for prisoners of war to get in touch with their families, and we found out that he was alive in France. Now the waiting was not so hard anymore. Sometime in the future, they would surely release their prisoners and allow them to return home. What a blessing to know Vati and France. Families who knew their soldiers were in Russia often had no hope at all. And the day we were anticipating came. In the summer of 1947. It was at night. Everyone was asleep when Mutti was awakened by a strange and unusual noise. Someone was throwing pebbles at her bedroom window. It was Vati, and now the war was finally over for our family.